Welcome to Sober and Lit,
the podcast for women who want to get sober, stay sober, and live a life that's way more lit than it ever was with wine.
We're your hosts, Ruby and Susan, two alcohol freedom coaches keeping it real with stories, tools, and zero judgment.
Whether you're sober curious or all in, you're in the right place.
Let's feel lit, alcohol free. Welcome back to the Sober and Lit podcast. I'm Coach Ruby. I'm here with Coach Susan, and we have a special guest today, Anna Donaghey. Yeah, yay! Welcome. Yeah, I want to introduce our listeners to Anna. Anna is a certified alcohol mindset and life coach who helps people rethink their relationship with alcohol, not because they have to, but because they deserve more. After a 25-year career as a strategic planner in advertising, Anna now blends psychology, reflection tools, and identity-based coaching to help clients uncover the deeper needs behind the drinking habits. She has an upcoming book, What Are You Thirsty For?, that invites readers to explore longing, desire, and self-awareness as a path to lasting change. Anna hosts the Big Drink Rethink podcast, which has won awards, and she's creating space for curious conversations around alcohol without pressure, shame, or rules. So we want to welcome Anna. Welcome.
Yay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ruby. Thanks, Susan. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Oh, so glad you're able to come. So let's dive right in. And why don't you begin by telling us about your drinking story? And, maybe there was a turning point where you realized alcohol didn't have to be that total disaster in your life. Like it was for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, gosh, my drinking story started when I was about 14 or 15. And stopped about 5.5, 6 years ago. So it spanned quite a significant chunk of my life. And it began as it does for many people with those kind of rebellious teenage drinks, feeling my way through angsty teenagehood and quite often not doing what I was supposed to be doing, whether that was drinking, you're not supposed to be drinking, or, doing that instead of schoolwork or all that sort of stuff. So that's where it all started. I had a very good childhood, so there was no sort of trauma to speak of or anything like that. It was just a floating into, almost a sort of sleepwalking into drinking at that age when, teenagers are sort of destined to do that kind of thing. And then at various stages of my life, it was significant. It's been omnipresent, really. University was, just an alcohol bath. And that sort of, lasted 3 or 4 years. I went from university into a manufacturing job, which saw me in a sort of slightly chameleon-like role, sort of drinking to fit in to a very male-orientated, like macho. I loved fantastic environment. I have to say, I started working on a production line. Well, actually, let's go back. I was a graduate intake for a large car company that used to exist in the UK. And in those days, those kind of car companies made you do a kind of tour of each of the departments. You had to do a stint here and a stint there. And they insisted that you spend at least 3 months working on the factory floor, bolting bits to cars. And that's what I did for the first 3 months. And it was wonderful. I was a bit of an anomaly, a girl on the night shifts with a slightly posh English accent running alongside some very regional accents in Birmingham. But I felt like I fitted in. And, the guys I worked with took me under their wing, and we would leave the shift and we would go to the local pubs and we would play darts and pool and, billiards and stuff like that and drink. So that entrenched my drinking. That was a significant step for me. And then, zip forward a few years and I started, as you said a moment ago, a long career in advertising. So very different from those sort of beginnings on the factory floor, but very booze-soaked again. And this time, didn't really need to even buy it for myself. Sort of hospitality and expense accounts and airport lounges and drinks on flights and all sorts of, easy ways to get hold of booze pretty much whenever you wanted it.
I'm picturing Mad Men, that TV series.
Mad Men, yeah. Well, kind of. Well, yeah, I mean, to a degree, yes. I mean, it's the structure of advertising agencies hadn't really changed since the depiction in that series. You had the creatives, you had the planners. I was a planner, so I was there to sort of try and strategize the advertising, help brands grow, tell brand owners how to position their products so that people would buy them. And, I worked on lots of different types of accounts, cars and finance and all sorts, and booze. I worked on alcohol accounts. And it was, it's interesting now looking back, because I drank heavily all the way through that period of my life, right up until, my sort of mid 40s, late 40s. And it really was a very sort of booze soaked time for me. I think I was running away from a lot of things, pushing away a lot of emotions that I didn't really notice, because I was in an environment where everyone was doing a very similar thing. I had complete permission to drink, and no one raised or batted an eyelid, really, at that sort of behaviour. And I was a single girl. I was living in London, with a decent salary. And I just went out after work 5 nights a week, crawled back to my flat by about, late evening, and went to bed. And that was probably the sole purpose of my flat, was to go to sleep and then get up and do it all again the next day. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It is crazy how we've normalized over drinking,
Yeah.
Like that's just, you look around and everybody's doing it. So you don't think that it's a problem, because everybody's doing it. I love the word you use, chameleon-like, and how often that's how we get drawn into drinking. If drinking is a way that helps you fit in, and that's really a lot of times where people get hooked, right?
Yeah.
Drinking to fit in. Yeah.
And I think, looking back now, having done the work that we advocate doing when you're sort of wanting to sort of stop drinking or question why you were drinking in the first place, I can look at the fact I was giving alcohol so many jobs to do. Fitting in was one of the prime ones. I was single. I was new in London at that time, and I was also talking about heavily drinking in the manufacturing environment. I was new in the workplace. I was new in Birmingham. I was literally going into new scenarios and wanting, not consciously, obviously, but sort of craving a level of acceptance, camaraderie, solidarity, fun, friendship, community. And it seemed to be the sort of the glue. It was definitely the glue. Now, obviously, there were probably other communities elsewhere that weren't glued together by alcohol, but given the fact that I was a drinker, I was never going to be seeking them out. Birds of a feather flock together, don't they? And I was kind of, I was on the hunt for people who would, I suppose, normalize, as you say, Ruby, normalize my drinking. So
I just so relate, because I worked in the wine industry, similar. And what I love, what you said, is like just complete permission to drink. I mean, you seek out the people to fit in, but then it's like we keep one-upping each other. That's what it felt like over time, I'm going to drink, bring the very best, Pinot Noir. And
somebody said to me once, you must have loved the advertising industry because of how boozy it was. And I said, well, make no mistake. I mean, there would have been a very big subconscious draw from me towards that industry because of those perceptions. Because by the time I went into that industry, I was already a drinker. I was in my late 20s, and I was already well ensconced in alcohol. It was, my normal behavior. So, I was drawn towards an industry where I knew that would be, very, very acceptable. And it really was. It really was. It was only when I had my first daughter, when I was in my mid 30s, and it was only when I was leaving there for maternity leave that my drinking began to stand out as not being normal, because suddenly I wasn't going into Soho every day, and I wasn't surrounded by all these people drinking or, doing recreational drugs and whatnot. I was now, at home in the suburbs, with this real clear thought in my mind that I needed to sort of grow up and be a bit more responsible. But I carried on drinking. And it began to stand out a bit for me. I began to feel like, oh, not everybody is doing this. So, and I think that's when it began to probably really dawn on me that I had, something of of a problem with it. But yeah, that was as it sort of, it had got its grip by then, as we know it tends to do.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. That's what alcohol does. It's an addictive substance, and it does get a grip on you when you drink it, and I think a lot of us go like, how did this happen? If we still have that mindset of there's normal drinkers and then there's, people who have severe alcohol use disorder, and there's only two camps, right? But no, anybody can become addicted or hooked, or, alcohol can get its grip on you, and noticing that is so important. And the earlier you notice it, the better.
Of course, I think, if you it's addictive, and if you drink enough of it, therefore, and particularly in the wrong circumstances or for the wrong, what I would say are the wrong reasons, then it's a human problem. It's not a me problem or a Susan problem or a Ruby problem. It can happen to anybody. It happens to a lot of people, and it's, I think, what often takes us by surprise is the how has this happened, when it's just felt so normal. It's the how has it happened, why? But it's as you say, there's no shame that should come with it. And I wish to God, if there's one thing different in this life, it would be that we can drop the stigma and the shame surrounded by it, because it's such a common problem. It's such a common problem.
Yeah. Did you have I don't know, when did you finally get alcohol free, or realize I'm going to work on this and figure this out? Or how did it come up for you?
Well, I thank the Lord till this day that I didn't have a rock bottom. So there was no drama, no catastrophe, no kind of, wrecked marriage or accidents or ill health or anything like that. Or I say no ill health. There was no massive health scare. I think I was mentally and emotionally, I was in a very, very bad way. I'd been obviously drinking for a very long time in an unhealthy way. I was emotionally super dependent on it. I was drinking to manage my emotions all the time. So when you think of the whole myriad of emotions, if you're drinking to manage your emotions, there's hardly ever a reason when you haven't got an excuse to drink, because there are so many different types of emotions and they come up daily. So if you're drinking to manage your emotions and those emotions come up daily, you can see how it's so easy to become a daily drinker. So I just realized, I knew that, the amount of empties I was putting out, was not normal behavior as it could be defined. My relationship with my husband was beginning to be a bit testy because, cracks were beginning to show. I was drinking secretively, which is never anything, massively secret is never a great thing in a marriage. So that was beginning to sort of throw things a little bit. My children, when I gave up, were, what would they have been, about sort of 9 and 12 or something around that sort of age group. But they were beginning to notice that my behavior was erratic. Why is mummy behaving like this? Why is mummy talking like that? That sort of thing. That kind of gripped.
Kids know. They really do know.
Oh, yeah. I was becoming less good at hiding it. And my husband was beginning to get better at noticing it. And I just couldn't go on that way anyway. I had one of those moments when I just thought, I can't do this anymore. I was exhausted. I was absolutely exhausted. I was exhausted from the lying, the hiding, the kidding myself, the such crap, awful sleep, waking up on the back foot all the time. I was building a successful career. God knows how I was managing to do that. I was sort of...
I think back, how do we do that when we were hungover every morning,
Yeah. And, but it was absolutely exhausting. And there were a couple of, really tight conversations whereby my husband was now also beginning to share that we can't go on like this kind of vibe. And I knew something had to be done. And then it was just a classic moment where I sat there one day and I looked at how my life was going to play out if I carried on the way I was drinking. And it just looked so bleak. That I had a very low moment of just realizing that I didn't want my life to look like that, and in that moment, there was a sense of this is no life. And it wasn't, that didn't automatically mean that, I just gave up, because it was obviously, it was hard. It was, a lot of work to do. but I did know that I wanted to. I did know that I didn't know how I was going to, and I didn't know how I was going to navigate a lot of the things that I've been hiding from, but I knew that I wanted to. And I think that was the first thing. I wanted to be a better, be a better wife, be a better mother, be a better role model. I wanted to have a better relationship with myself, and I could write down all the things that I wanted to be better.
Yeah.
And that was an important day, I think.
Yeah. And that's a perfect kind of segue towards the title of your book. I mean, so I am just so excited and proud of you that you wrote this book. And the title is, What Are You Thirsty For? I mean, that's it. You're thirsty to be a better mom and like all the things. And I'm just so proud of your accomplishment. And it's going out on January 8th. So we'll have the link, to buy the book. And so tell me, it's such a powerful question. What are you thirsty for? And how is your life going to play out? I love if you sit down, all of the listeners, how do you see your life playing out? Yeah. So so
I was going to say, one of the things that I realized when I stopped drinking was obviously this idea that we've been using alcohol for so many jobs. We've given it so many roles. We've, and certainly in my lifetime, I had started, use the sort of the job analogy. I'd first employed it as a sort of personal assistant for social situations and establishing myself in social groups. But it had sort of over the years, it had been promoted and promoted and promoted and promoted. And now it was kind of running the show. It was the top dog. And I refer to it in my book as the kind of the chief emotions officer, the CEO, running the ship, calling all the shots. And I just looked at it and I just thought, goodness me, how many things have I been delegating to alcohol? How many jobs have I been giving it to do? Now, I just, through the work that I did, I came to realize that there's lots and lots of books out there which tell you how to give up, or they advise you on how you can potentially give up alcohol. And I was very clear that I didn't want this to be a sort of a how-to book. I wanted it to be more of a what-if book. What if alcohol wasn't in control? What if we took back control? And actually, if in a way, I wanted to offer something before crisis. So not necessarily to help walk people through a program of giving up alcohol, but just to sort of intervene, a bit of an intervention, if you like, before crisis hits. Things I wish I'd known when I was in the midst of my drinking. So I saw a gap, if you like, for a compassionate reframing that says it's not about hitting rock bottom. It's not about how bad you're drinking. The key question that I'd love people to ask is, is your life good enough? Is it good enough? And if it's not, and if in any shape or form alcohol, is playing a part in that, then it's got to be worth looking at, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like this book is for everyone that's drinking any amount of alcohol, because that question, you want to intervene. Why wait for this rock bottom? I also really dislike that you have to wait for a rock bottom. I mean, that's when your life is really you can just ask the question, is your life good enough? And
for me was it, Ruby. It's as simple as that, because I think, as I was just saying a moment ago, when I was in the depths of my drinking and, working in advertising, I could look left and I could look right and I could see people who were drinking more than me. Mm-hmm. And I could think, well, my drinking's not that bad. I'm not as bad as them. Or, I've not got a bigger problem as them. And I was always able, when you play that comparison game, you're always able to find a reason to continue, because you can always find the person who you benchmark as, I'm not as bad as that. And it just dawned on me that for years and years and years, I've been convincing myself of that and missing the biggest point of all, which is we have one life and one shot at it. And, if we want to live the life that we want, we need to kind of do that by design. We can't do that by just defaulting to drinking behavior, because it can have the capacity to just erase bits of us without us knowing it, or, lower our sights of ambition, steal our energy, and put us on the back foot. And it's not good enough, So it is, I suppose, it sounds a bit, I want it to sound fluffy because I'm really proud of the book, but the positioning for it is for anyone who drinks, who maybe quietly sometimes says, I'm not sure whether this is serving me, or, maybe they have a quiet nag that it's, that there may be drinking a little too much on occasion. Really just an invitation to look at two things. First of all, what jobs they might be giving it to do. So what they're really reaching for, and what they're thirsty for underneath the whole current of, what are you really looking for? But also then to look at what you're thirsty for in life and get it back on, as a possibility by removing this barrier of alcohol. That's what it's about in a nutshell.
Right. So in your book, it's like exploring your desires rather than focusing on the problems, as a way to help change the approach to like drinking less or not at all.
Yeah. So, there's an arc of the book. There's the first sort of 6 or 7 chapters of the book explore how alcohol can kind of disconnect us from the things that we need or want, how it can do it in a myriad of ways, and how it can do it slowly and subconsciously, how we absorb different stories and how we embed alcohol in our life to do certain roles, but how inevitably, we arrive at this perspective that it can both distance us from the things that we want. It stops us listening to ourselves, leaving these messages, these emotions and these signals that are telling us what we want, and how we can just become a little bit adrift. How we might be living in a sort of counterfeit state of happiness and fulfillment rather than anything more meaningful. And then the middle of the book gives you a sense of, let's do a little bit of an audit on, your satisfaction or your, sense of achievement in all aspects of your life. And then, if you're hungry for more, which 99% of people are, the second part of the book sets out a bit of a pathway to explore how to bring that back and how to get that back in the game. So
I love that arc. Yeah.
I wish that I'd had this book back in 2013, the first time I really felt like I needed, I'm getting emotional. I needed to explore my drinking, because at that time there was really only go to AA. And my drinking was, like you said, drinking a little bit too much on occasion, just having that niggling feeling that I really needed to look at this. But when it was proposed to me as like, that's my only option, I and I did go to AA for 8 months, but I just kept feeling like I didn't belong there and that my drinking wasn't really at that level. And so, and they were very, it's no, there was no middle ground of exploring or understanding or any of that. And so then when I left AA, I was completely adrift with sort of this idea of, well, maybe my drinking is a little bit disordered, or I don't know. I just ignored it then. It was just like, well, that didn't work for me. So now I just have to ignore it and like just manage on my own. And it's just so brilliant and wonderful that we have so many books and resources now to explore drinking in a shame-free way. And for people to, at that level of, gee, my drinking is doesn't feel really right. I drink a little too much on occasion. And to be able to explore it then, not wait. I got alcohol free in 2020, not wait 7 years later or 8 years or 6 years later after I, left AA. So I'm just so thrilled that more and more people are coming out with their stories. I love the title, What Are You Thirsty For? Because I was thirsty for something, but I didn't know what. Yeah.
And every time, even in the moment when we're reaching for a drink, what we're reaching for really is what we think the drink's going to give us. We're reaching for relief. or we're reaching for permission to stop performing, or, we're looking for connection. So, the book does, clearly invite you to say, and explore what that is and find better tools. Because as you said, it's not our fault that we reach for alcohol, because society presents it as the answer. The industry I worked in for 25 years spun those stories to everything. But if you sort of can sit down and say, no, just hang on a minute, what do I really want? Because I genuinely believe that if we have better answers, obviously, better toolkits, and we're more aware, we can create that in a way that means that alcohol loses its grip. If we're fulfilling those needs through other means, then it automatically means there is less role for alcohol, because we're suddenly living a life that we don't want to escape from.
Yeah, I love that phrase.
Yeah, we're not looking for alcohol to fill in gaps, aches, desires, hankerings that we have, because we fill them in different ways. So there's the subtitle of the book. So yeah, it's what are you thirsty for? But then it's rethinking drinking and the life that you want, because it really does say that life that you want, go after it. And when you go after, and by the way, alcohol's probably getting in the way, sapping your energy, buggering up your sleep, blah, 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 blah. Once you start to step into that and create that, not through grand gestures, but little by little, then the role of alcohol softens anyway. I'm very passionate about that. It's one of my big sort of, banging the drum, if you like, that we know that alcohol can become a problem for people, but it's not the problem. So let's look at what those needs are, think about how we can fulfill them, and then, we'll stop demonstrating the behavior so much, or demonstrating the symptoms so much.
Yeah. In my story, and when I think back, I was so deep into it that I literally lost my identity and what I wanted in life. And it felt like my world got smaller and smaller and smaller. And I was going deeper into this like hole. And it's like this identity. I am Ruby who works in the wine industry. I am Ruby who drinks. Like drinking was so much a part of my identity and sense of self, but it was keeping me from everything that I loved in the end. And so this sense of identity, do you touch on that in your book at all? I feel like that. Yeah. Can you share a little bit about that? Because it sounds like you might have had that same identity in the advertising industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, it becomes baked in, so baked in. It's one of the key narratives that we tell ourselves is that this is who we are. This is who we are. That's like the sort of the program that's running through our brains all the time, and that alcohol is a key part of that. But the big fear comes there, doesn't it? Of saying, well, if I take this away, then who am I? Who am I if I'm not Ruby the drinker or Anna the advertising lush? Who am I if I'm not that person? And it brings a huge amount of resistance and a huge amount of fear to even exploring that question, because we don't know, and we're often,
who am I?
Who am I? And we're also in, probably going through other sort of like, questions in middle age or whatever it might be at the same time. And it's just a sort of like overwhelming sense of I don't know who I am without alcohol. But one of the things that I assert within the book is really, who do you want to be? Mm-hmm. Who do you want to be? Because that's surely a better place to start. We grow up, we're so young, we have ambitions and desires, and we all, almost in sort of childlike way, we have dreams of what we'll be doing at certain stages in our lives, or what jobs we might like, or where we might like to live, and who we might want to be with, and what life looks like. You turn around and say, am I where I want to be? Am I who I want to be? Am I doing what I want to be? And even if I'm not yet, am I on course? Am I on track? And so often, we can sort of almost wake up at a point in our life and wonder how we got to where we are and who we are. But I think we have a fear of change, but I think we have every right to change. It's our natural evolution to grow and develop. And the one thing that I really try and push in the book is that we haven't always been drinkers. We cannot be drinkers again. And we can want more. We can want more for ourselves. We can deserve more than we potentially have, or the place we found ourselves in. Alcohol, if we're drinking to any great extent, going to be part of the reason we don't have it, or we're not where we want to be, because of how pernicious it is and how it, wheedles its way into so many parts of our lives. So again, it's woven into our identity, but it's a key barrier to really being who we want to be. So mind yourself. And there's also, you'll know this exercise as coaches yourselves, you'll know the sort of the wheel of life exercise, where you look at of your life and say, career, money, finance, kids, intimacy, partnership, where are, and what does a 10 out of 10 look like? And it's almost guaranteed that the gap that exists in some shape or form because of alcohol, if you're a heavy drinker. So again, it's a bit of a wake-up call to say you can design your life and you can aim for more fulfillment in practically every section of your life. But alcohol is almost like the big domino that if you get that out of the way, then it opens up huge opportunities and huge possibilities again.
Yeah. And I think even not being a heavy drinker, a regular drinker, I would say too. Depends, what is heavy, you know what I mean? For me, heavy drinking would be 3 glasses. That was too much for me, you know what I mean? So, and other people, it's more than that. So that's where that comparison just doesn't work. It's whatever amount of alcohol doesn't work for you. Because it was really easy for me to look around and go, well, I don't drink as much as them. And so I guess I don't have a problem. But it felt like a problem for me. And so you really it has to be really personal.
Yeah, absolutely. I was coaching a lady a few months ago who we know that it's not a volume game. We know that, a drinking problem or a dependency isn't defined by volume. It's by the degree to which you feel you need it. And, I've coached people who might go out and say, I drink 15 pints a night. And you're like, oh, that's quite a lot. But you think to yourself, well, okay. But then I was coaching a lady who, she drank a big glass of wine every night. And she said to me, well, do you think I have a problem, Anna? And I said, well, do you think you have a problem? Tell me how you would feel if I told you you're not going to have that drink again. And she said, oh gosh, okay, that really scares me.
Yeah.
Really frightens me. And I said, well, it sounds like a problem then. You don't have to call that a drinking problem, but it sounds like a problem that you are scared about the absence of it. So talk to me about why. And she said, well, it's what gives me confidence. And I said, well, then that is a problem, isn't it? Because that means that you're outsourcing your confidence, your ability to go forward and do anything that you want on you having that drink. And that in itself is like she hadn't ever thought about it like that before. But so she's like, it's not a volume thing.
Right. I've had clients that's like, they're binge drinkers, right? They drink heavily every weekend, but then they don't drink on Monday through Friday. So it's not always drinking every night or drinking a bottle every night or half a bottle everybody's so indifferent too. It's your question. Is your life good enough? I love that question.
And I therefore, my hope is that the book is picked up by people who are just interested in asking that question about their life, rather maybe they're picking up the book through that lens rather than through the am I drinking too much lens. You could argue that your life, that someone could say, well, my life's pretty good, thank you very much. But then my answer could be, but could it be great? Could not drinking be the thing that helps you launch from good to great? You don't have to be going right back to where we started. You don't have to be at rock bottom to want better. You don't have to be very, very low to suddenly to want to feel very, very high. Do you know what I mean? You don't. Yeah. You don't have to reach depths before you want to shoot for more. And I think that in a very different way from, say, AA, where we kind of go in and it's all very much shrouded sometimes in the sense of shame and like this, I'm faulty and I'm broken and X, Y, and Z. This is no, you just want better and you deserve better, particularly if you're courageous enough to put your hand up and say, I want it. Do you know what I mean? So very different language, and it's a very different framing, I think. So, yeah.
I love it. Yeah. If you could, I want to segue to this, like if you could wave a magic wand and give our listeners one thing to explore more deeply in their own lives, what would that be?
I think without wanting to sound on repeat, I think it would be the honesty to ask that question, is my life good enough? Honesty to ask that question, and then the time and space to listen to the answer, and to also know, which is, you know, another sort of thing that I bang on about quite a lot, that to start that exploration is not a commitment to anything, you know, as far as drinking is concerned. It's just a commitment to yourself. Yeah, I want to find out, you know, I do want better, actually. So I'm just going to explore how drinking less, or, you know, taking a week off, or just one night a week helps me move along, you know, nudges me towards better. Because I think we sometimes get this big worry, don't we, that if we start, you know, looking at our drinking, that we're suddenly pledging ourselves to, you know, a complete and absolute overhaul in behavior. And that again puts us off. Whereas, you know, nothing ever gets better overnight by massive sweeping gestures. It happens incrementally, as you know, by making a little change here and a little change there. And suddenly, you know, it's all added up. So my question, you know, my point would be to say, I would ask it just, you know, the honesty to ask that question, is my life good enough? And really look at that. And if it's not, have the, I suppose, the courage, but also the honesty to start exploring whether alcohol is in any shape or form impacting on it, compromising you.
I love that so much. Is your life good enough, listeners? Yeah. Yeah. Well, Anna, we're at the part of our episode where we ask our listeners, and this is, I love this part, you know, so what do you do in your life to feel lit, alcohol free? Yeah.
To feel lit, alcohol free. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that you've had this response before, but since giving up alcohol and becoming a coach, and my new addiction, if you like, is to personal development. So I love embracing new stuff. And I know that sounds, but I have a little pleasure to myself every month to do 2 things that I'd never done before.
I love that.
Yeah, so, you know, it might be, and I'm kind of shooting here, but it could be, oh, no, I've never been to the opera. Well, why? Because I don't think I'd like it. We'll go to the opera and explore, you know, or, you know, try a different recipe. I've never cooked, you know, Peruvian food before. We'll try a Peruvian recipe. And it's just little things. It's little things, but the reason I like it so much, and the reason why that feeds me so much, is because I feel that so much was put on hold when I was drinking. So that's what I do. I just try and do things that I'd never done before. And my big sort of benchmark there is I probably wouldn't be doing if I was still drinking, because I wouldn't have felt stimulated to do it, or wouldn't have had the time, energy, or imagination to do it. It wouldn't have involved enough alcohol, so I wouldn't have done it. So that's my promise to myself. I'm sort of making up for time, really.
Mm-hmm. And stepping outside of my comfort zone, like that phrase is what kind of like, oh, never tried Peruvian food, you know, cooking. Step outside your comfort zone here. Step outside your comfort zone with the opera, or whatever. Oh my gosh, I think that would be a fun thing to have for myself. Like, let's do this 2 times a month. I do something new,
as often as you
can.
Yeah. Once a month, or, you know, whatever it is, do something that you'd not done before, and preferably something that you know very well you probably wouldn't have done if you were still drinking, because it just keeps reaffirming, you know, the choice that we've made not to drink. And life is opening back up again, and has opened back up in so many ways. I just, you know, want to keep that momentum going.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant.
I know. But one thing I definitely would never have been doing is exactly what we're doing now, because I was afraid of like public speaking. I never would have done a podcast, and to talk about alcohol on a podcast. So yeah, I'm just so proud of you, Anna. Yeah.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Well, you've done amazing stuff as well. And, I love this podcast. So I'm glad that you are doing, you've got over your public speaking concerns and, bit the bullet. But isn't it great though? I've never met a single person for whom a door hasn't opened that they didn't expect when stopped drinking. Which is why it's so important, to think of not drinking is I always say, well, alcohol free isn't a destination, it's a gateway. It literally opens stuff up. And that's what's happened for you guys too with this podcast, which is great.
Yeah. And writing a book. I don't know if that would have been possible, right? When you're drinking,
Well, it would most certainly not have been possible. So that's another very good example.
Yeah. So we'll definitely put the links to purchase the book and, all your other links that you want to share with our listeners. Thank you so much, Anna. This has been a really fabulous conversation. And I love your question. I'll say it again. Is your life good enough? That's the question.
Is your life good enough? Exactly. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to the Sober and Lit podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps get the word out.
And remember, do something today to help you feel lit.
See you next week.